Hi, we were just waiting a few minutes to give the opportunity to more people to join the Zoom meeting. But I think we can get started now, and people will just join as they can. And so, yeah, I just wanted to welcome everybody to this event, which is, as you know, discussion with film director Selim Mourad about his film, The Slow Father Obsession, and which is also the first community building event of the Center for Middle East Studies of the year. And so, yeah, generally we're organizing these events so that the CMES community can get together, get to know each other. And also it's an opportunity to invite great guest speakers like today's guest, Selim Mourad, who Professor Lali will introduce in a few moments. And we're hoping to host at least one more event of the sort during this semester, and we'll tell you more about it when the time comes. And so this event will be moderated by Professor Nadia Lali and myself. And to just quickly introduce myself, my name is Rita Slewi. I use she, her pronoun. I'm a sophomore student, double concentrating in history and Middle East studies. And I'm also a student assistant for the Center for Middle East Studies. And is as part of that position that I'm co-organizing events such as this one. And roughly, Professor Lali and I are planning on structuring the events by first having 30 minutes of the both of us asking questions, going back and forth asking questions to Selim, and then having the 30 other minutes incorporating some questions from the audience. So please feel free to use the chat feature to write questions you have throughout the event, and then we'll get to them in the second section. And you can also use the raise hand feature in that second section to ask your questions directly. So now I'll pass it on to Professor Nadia Lali, who, as most of you know, I'm guessing, is a professor of international studies, of anthropology and Middle East studies, as well as the director of Middle East studies, and whose main research interests revolve around feminist activism and gendered mobilizations, mainly with reference to Iraq, Egypt, Lebanon, and the Kurdish political movement. And she's also involved with feminist organizations and campaigns transnationally. So yeah, Professor Lali.
Thanks so much, Rita, and really a big thank you to you for organizing the event today, of course, jointly with Barbara Oberkötter, who has been facilitating this. And so we'll be recording this event. I hope that's okay with you, and then we can make it available to other people who signaled that they were interested but just couldn't make it this evening. So hopefully whatever we'll discuss tonight, we will make available to others. And I'm so grateful to Selim Mourad for joining us this evening. So Selim is in Beirut and it's quite late there. So, we thank you a lot. So let me introduce Selim to you. Selim Mourad was born in Beirut. He did both his bachelor's and his master's degrees in directing and film research at the Université Saint-Joseph in Beirut. And he has been involved in a variety of different kinds of filmmaking. So he did, for example, short personal documentaries like A Letter to My Sister in 2008, in which he started his exploration of his family dynamics, which we'll, of course, discuss more in relation to the film that we're looking at this evening. But also he did another personal documentary called A Trip to the Barber Shop, which came out in 2009. Then Selim also was involved in medium-length fiction films like The Demolition and X the Conception, in which he mixes reality and fiction. He worked on a political trilogy of the body, and so I have to get some light now. Linceul in 2018, Cortex in 2019, and Agathe Mousse in 2020. Now, his first feature documentary, which is This Little Father Obsession, Vision du Réel, was in 2016, which is a film that we'll be discussing today. And I assume that most of you will have seen it. We've made it available. Now, currently, Selim is a film teacher in Beirut, and he's working on developing his next project, and maybe we'll find out what this project is. But Rita, I was wondering if you could just say a few more words, because you've known Selim for a while, and maybe you can sort of reflect a little bit on how you met him and what you can tell us, beyond the formal biography.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I don't know Selim for that long, but I just know that I know him personally a little bit because I had reached out to him last year because I wanted access to one of his movies, actually for your class, and I just got like and then actually we decided that maybe I could come to Beirut the following summer and work with him on a project, which unfortunately did not happen because of the pandemic. But just through these like more personal encounters, I just got to know that beyond being a great filmmaker, he's also a super helpful and considerate and friendly person. And so yeah, I'm very grateful that he's here with us today, especially also because of how late it is. So yeah, and I guess maybe I can get us started with the first question that's somewhat general. So as Professor Lali mentioned, this Little Father Obsession is the first full-length film of Selim. And following a number of short films that you had already made, Selim, I was just wondering what motivated you to address like these specific themes in this Little Father Obsession, like family relationships, queerness, filiation, and were there certain things you were inspired by, or did you have certain goals in mind when making these movies, or just more generally, why did you decide to make this movie?
Wow. Also, good night, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Nadia. Thank you, Rita, and everyone who's here tonight. This film takes me back to many moments in my life. One of them being when the general practitioner, my doctor, when I was a young teenager, once was, checking, doing a general checkup, and as he was checking my genitals, he told me, these are the jewels of the family, and since you're an only child, I did not have siblings at that time, you're gonna have to bring your family 12 children. So since that moment, I felt a big pressure or responsibility to continue the family line. And it was around that time, a bit earlier, a bit after that, I started discovering my sexuality and that I was attracted to men. And this caused me such a big depression or feelings of guilt, loneliness, and non-fitting with the general outline that's expected of me or any young man my age and my context, that at 13 years old, just to be able to survive, I decided to remove any idea or any prospect of marrying and having kids. I took this decision at 13, and it helped me survive, not to have illusions, not to delude myself. And this made me feel very lonely at the time. I felt I was gonna, like I say in the film, die old one day, and they would discover my body and by the smell, of the decaying, etc. So there's this feeling of surviving by knowing that you won't procreate. And when 12 years later I decided to make the film, I was needing, or I had the need to go back to this decision that was very formative or crucial in my young years, and to see it again, to question it, to see what does it mean not to have children, to be expected to continue a family line while you won't be continuing a family line. What's this tragedy is all about? So this is all inside my mind, and it needed a film form this happened at the same time where the family building was having a project on it, and was gonna be sold or not, and we were gonna leave it, the family that my grandfather built. So I saw an irresistible link between the finite, or the fear of the end, inside my head, and the concrete end of the concrete. Sorry for the pun, but it felt like my ideas did fit the building situation, and it was an occasion to think of a film. And the original name or title for the film was Counterbalance, which I found very heavy, but it was because I wanted to naturally think or imagine that I could be a counterbalance to the general schema or structure or normativity. I did not know those words back then, that was expected of me. Yeah, that's very general.
Well, thanks so much, Rita. If it's okay, I'll ask the next question. Yeah, this is really interesting. I mean, one of the things that struck me most, I mean, there were so many layers. There's so many layers to the film, and as I'd already told you before this event, I definitely want to see it a few times more. But one of the things that I guess sort of struck me most was your relationship to your parents. I mean, particularly to your father. But there was this range of different emotions, from extreme awkwardness, where it was almost painful to watch them in front of the camera. I mean, you could feel how awkward they were. And of course, you also put them in awkward situations. I kept thinking, so how come they're actually agreeing to participate in the film and do certain things with you? Like, the kind of most extreme kind of illustration of that was the head in the washing machine. And, your mother first, and then your father sort of following suit. But then being like, very natural and confident, and you can feel the intimacy on the other extreme. And yeah, I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the process. What did it actually take for you? I mean, I was very moved by what I thought must be a very complex relationship, and that sort of came across through the film. But when I sort of tried to imagine trying to convince my parents, there's no way I would have convinced them. So yeah, if you can reflect a little bit on the process of making the film, and the role of how your parents feature in it, but also the tensions between this extreme awkwardness and this super intimate, very easygoing feeling, which is both present, and so many other feelings as well.
I'll start by saying that I would not make this film now, and and you're saying that you could not ask your parents. I would say maybe now you could not ask them. I don't know if there was a time when you were younger and I was younger when we could. When I was 25 at the time of making the film, there was this, I don't know, I can't name it. There was a need. It was necessary. It was necessary to make the film. Now I would be so overwhelmed by them saying yes, no, and accepting and not accepting, and them being older at the time now, that this film would not be possible. I'm glad it exists because it's the fruit of a specific time. I'm gonna go back a bit to the earlier question and come back to add that one of the reasons I made this film is a promise I did to myself when I was a teenager, and I was thinking I'm the only gay man or gay boy on the face of the earth, and I was in the bathroom and crying, you know, my eyes out, and I said, I want to do something one day to make it easier for the next generation. Now, meanwhile, you know, YouTube happened and social media happened, and it was not necessary that I do anything anymore because access to information was so easier, you know, around 2012, 13. So the film was not, you know, the kind of media or form or product that was done and was reached or reached and was seen by such a younger generation that need this film. It did not reach them. The people who were 16 when this film came out, I don't think they saw it even. So this, I don't have an answer to this. I don't want to think about it. What's the impact or the? So to come back to your question, this need to make the film made me sometimes flirt with my limits, and I knew I had to do it. I had come out to my parents 3 to 4 years before the film, but still it was not very okay. We did not speak about it so much, and every now and then we would argue again. It happened once that even it got physically violent between my father and me. I would regularly remind him of my sexuality and say something. He would answer, and then it ends up in bursts of insults, and it was something frequent. And then 2 days later, it would be all lovey-dovey again, because there is love between my family and me. So in this film, when I wrote it, and then we got a first acceptance from a fund or from a writing you know, lab, my father saw the synopsis written on the paper in the house, and that's how he knew what the film is about. I did not come myself and speak to him. It's too difficult. He knew what the film is about. This made him a bit crazy, but at the same time, it made me feel comfortable that at least he knows I'm not making a film that he doesn't know what it is about. This being said, the scenes themselves, I did not tell them before. And the way they are in the film don't necessarily mean what you thought they meant to me when I filmed them. For example, I was very inspired by pictures by Akram Zaatari, Lebanese artist and filmmaker Akram Zaatari, who would take pictures of people in, I saw pictures that he took of people in weird positions, situations, carrying books or things like that. And I felt, now that we're leaving this house that my grandfather built, I want to see the bodies of my parents in unfamiliar places. Like I took a video or a shot of my father lying on the attic, in the attic of the house. He would never do that. I felt like I wanted to invest the bodies in the house in a way that they're not used to it. And one of these was putting the head inside the washing machine. So for me, it was supposed to be almost fixed still, like a shot that would come for 2-3 seconds inside the film, just to populate the film with a little surrealism. But to drag them to just do it and just have, you know, a graphic form took such, went to such an extreme degree of agreeing, not agreeing, that at the end of the day, one of the editing doctors that saw the film during the edit told me, you have all the elements of your film inside this shot. It should be the first one. So it was never supposed to be a provocation or a come to I want to force you in. It was supposed to be, please guys, let's play along and let's do those images that I have in my head. But they resisted, and then the resistance became a matière, a matter itself, a theme in the film. Like the second one, where they think I'm provocative. For me, I really wanted to reproduce and reconstitute a family picture. We used to take many of those when I was a kid every year on the Rameau celebration, which is 1 week before Easter. So we would put our best clothes I told them, put your best clothes on, and I will put my, you know, truthful clothes on, which was my nudity. And I did not tell them that. So when I entered in, it was really very hard, and people think I'm cruel. Maybe I was, but after shooting the scene, you know, I spent lots of time crying with my assistant director, thinking, you know, I, you know, did the undoable. I'm like Noah in the Bible. I uncovered my father's, you know, nudity, or inverted that. You know, it was very intense. I hope I answered you.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Rita?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And you mentioned a bit how you felt like you were, flirting with boundaries and limits in many ways. So like, like with the relationship with your parents throughout the movie. And that brings me to something else I was thinking. So actually, that's one thing that really struck me about the movie, how like you blend lines, you go beyond binaries. So like even how mixing genres, like not solely documentary or fiction, but both, and like also not solely like fiction scenes or documentary scenes, but like bringing some surreal and surrealism within like interviews, and like with like the washing machine, the blood tears, or the nudity. And some other way I saw kind of like pushing boundaries and lines was also how like you did not solely put yourself like in the traditional filmmaker position of behind the camera and directing, but also inside of the frame and like actively participating in different scenes. And I just wanted to ask you what that meant for you, and if you could reflect a bit on that, and like how you position yourself within and with your movies. And I also want to remind the audience that they can write questions in the chat for later.
I'll try to be smart like the first time and give an extra answer for the previous question in this one, and say that this film happened between the yes and the no of my parents. This film was possible because all the action, or all the project, or the process of the film happened between this little space between the yes and the no. If they were totally against and they did not play the game at all, there would be no film. If they were okay on everything, there would be no point of making the film. So the film is between this yes and no, and I could extrapolate it and say it's a bit between the reality and the fiction. So in a way, it is a documentary. I am documenting real people. Tony is playing Tony, Siham is playing Siham, Selim is playing Selim. In a general sense, it is a documentary, but it's a creative, very phantasmatic one, because Selim is playing Selim, but also Selim is playing his grandfather, Selim. And I mean, it's such an appealing, mixture. Plus, we have the same name. I can't not play the role. I mean, it's like it's calling me to do that, and the story is somehow my story beside my parents and the little stories of the family. So it's almost a no-brainer to be part of the film and to appear. I think we're all tools for a film, and I'm the biggest tool. I can't not use myself. I can't not use the things I've got in order to tell the story. For example, during my short films, I noticed that I like the way I use my voice as a voiceover. Of course, I'll use it, and if I can play my grandfather and activate the scene from within. For example, there was a scene where as my grandfather dressed and made up like my grandfather, I go to visit my father, and he was a bit surprised to see me. It was like a weird moment because I did resemble him a bit. Who else could do that? So it was a game between in and out. That's not very easy all the time. You got to speak well with the DOP and tell him what you want. And sometimes if it's just a documentary scene, like when I'm going to meet members of my family, like the adopted uncle, etc., then I can't even look at the frame. It's really, I won't say cinema verite, but I'm really just meeting people, and I depend on the instinct, camera instinct of the director of photography. So how can I say it in a filmmaker's way? I had this image at some point in my mind while thinking of the film, that I want to create frames that would be like painting frames or photographic frames that I would really compose in a way that I like, with the lighting, with the setting. And then inside this frame that is very artificial, I would like the characters, my parents, anybody else, to be as natural as they can. That's a bit the filmmaker's vision that I had for most of the film. One of the main example is the central scene of the last night, in the house. I put a camera, we installed it on the ceiling on top of their beds, and it was actually the last night. And I knew that I will have them in the square that is the bed. Inside the square, that is the frame of the film. And they would be sleeping, my father and my mother, next to each other. And then, now that the lighting is good, the composition is good, I went out of the room and did nothing anymore, just kept rolling to see what they would say. And I discovered it afterwards on the editing when watching. So it's like making sure to give a frame, a cadre for for my image desires, and then inside the characters would be themselves. Even the blood tears, I told my parents to stand up in a way, and I put the droplets of blood inside my mom's eyes, and then I started rolling. I did not even tell them what to say. They stayed silent, and at some point the church bells rang, and this caused a joke between them, and they started speaking about something else. So it was this kind of process of mixing real emotions of the moment inside an artificial frame.
Yeah. So I told you, Selim, I'm a professor of gender studies, although I'm an anthropologist by training. And so obviously I'm very much interested in the gender relations that are, present in your film. And so, there are so many different gender relations. I mean, there is, again, your parents, and I mean, your mother, although she is a big presence there, but she hardly talks. I mean, I think the few times she talks, I mean, what stands out is, when she says, sleep escaped me, or, when they're in bed. And so there are very few times that she talks. So there is that. Then there is a relationship between you and the various female characters and the male characters, your ex-lover. Then there are these then there's this kind of mystical, there is the female narrator who is playing an important role. Then there is the young woman that you sort of start have a relationship, friendship with. So how much was gender on your mind, and how do you think does your film disrupt heteronormative gender relations or ideas? But at the same time, it also depicts quite traditional gender relations when it comes to your parents, for example. So how much were you conscious of, or how much do you see, even retrospectively, you playing with gender in your film?
Of course, I would need help in this question. Of course, these kinds of topics were not on my mind during the making of the film. I'm not even sure I knew a field like gender studies existed in 2012. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So I just followed what I felt like doing. That's how conscious I was. So to start with the imaginary character of Carole, with whom I speak throughout the whole film. First, she's the producer of the film. And she's a prominent Lebanese actress that appeared in 4 of my previous short and medium length films. And this inspired her to open a small production house and produce my film. So it was really, in fact, I'll give you all the ideas that come to my mind and you sort out the gender analysis. We wanted at some point, because she was around an age where it was still possible to think of a baby, and then at some point we thought, why not have a baby together, me and her? It was like a recurrent inside, not joke, but inside thought, if you know. And we used to say at the time that we would call him Ralph. And at some point we wanted the film to be called Ralph, and then Ralph did not happen, but we had the film. So there's first this relationship that's at the origin of the film. I used to sit hours every time in her bed thinking about the film and then recording, and then those recordings became the basics or the outline of the voiceover that the film became.
Okay.
So since I don't like voiceover that is very directive, filmmaker speaking to audience, I decided that the voiceover would be a dialogue that the audience witnesses, and that I did not invent, but it doesn't really exist. It's not very common. I saw it in Hiroshima Mon Amour by Alain René from Marguerite Duras. So since the beginning, if you want, in the genesis of the film, you have a man and a woman. So she's there since the creation of the film. And in my own, not creation, but bringing to earth, there's my father and my mother. And, very heteronormative, everything I'm saying. so my father and my mother, and my father loves camera. And he wanted to be an actor. He still says it. And somehow I feel I'm participating in maybe realizing his dream, even though he would have preferred to play John Wayne, not be my father in a documentary. So even though he dislikes what we're doing in the film, he's still attracted by the fact that we're making a film. My mother disliked this totally. She just was there because I'm her son and she wants to help me make the film. There was really this toxic, and it's still toxic, and we had a fight today. So there's this thing that she wants to be there for me, but anytime I pushed her, she wouldn't answer in front of the camera. And she was very conscious, more than my father. She would tell me off camera that I know this film will be made and I know that one day people will see it. I don't want to reveal myself. While my father, would reveal himself and then maybe regret it later. It was a bit this dynamic. So at some point, when you keep knocking on a door that doesn't really want to open, in documentary filmmaking, you are taken by the road by the door that tells you, I'm open, which is my father in that case. But in the editing, we saw that her presence and silent presence became that spoke more even than if she had spoken with words. It's not that I silenced her myself. There were some interviews with her, but they were, they couldn't stand the edit. They would be void, or she's a real resistant, she's stronger than the camera. In that sense. And then there's Jessica that I actually met during the shooting of this party, and everything you saw is true. I tried to create this relationship, but she was afraid that, I mean, she likes guys, so she might get attached, even though she knows I'm gay. While since I'm not attracted to women, she felt that I was more safe playing this game and manipulating her. Even though I did tell her that, even though I'm not attracted to women, but I am allowing myself to get entangled in something. Despite this, she said no, and we became friends. So what's the film's take on gender? The film comes, the sentence that starts the film almost is be fruitful and multiply, that comes from the Genesis of the Bible. So there is a very big heteronormative demand at the core of the film. And I don't know if the 1 hour 43 minutes managed to reduce it a bit or queer it a bit or take it elsewhere.
No, I mean, I definitely think it queered and shook things up. And there's of course also the dialogue and the images with I assume it's your ex-partner lover, but even the between men and women, I do think that you very much shook it up while showing both the kind of the heteronormative. And my next question would have been, and I will ask that later, about the sort of threat of reproduction and procreation, but I'm conscious that we have someone who raised their hands, Mohammed. Mohammed, would you like to ask your question now?
Hi. Yeah,
hello.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. My question is, as someone who grew up in Lebanon, sort of watching Lebanese TV and Lebanese media and all of that, one of the many things that stood out to me in the movie is just all the nudity scenes. And I know you also spoke a bit about this when you were chatting with the professor and Rita. And I agree, there's also the element of shock with the first nude scene with the family photo, but then also as the movie progresses, it just becomes more casual and it feels more purposeful and more intentional. So I was just wondering if you could maybe reflect a bit on that.
Thank you, Muhammad, for your question. I will start by saying that after this film, I did a trilogy on the nude body. So really, it opened the doors. And this is an answer to almost a previous question by Rita. If I go back to 2008 and Letter to My Sister, there's one shot where I speak with my dead sister in the mirror and I decide to tell her, hey, okay, so let's go back to basics. I'm gonna reintroduce myself, and I remove my t-shirt. and then I introduce myself. So that was a t-shirt. Then in Ex la Conception, the film that Dr. Nadi mentioned, there's a scene where Carol is a filmmaker and I'm an actor that comes to do a casting. I appear just 15 seconds. She tells me, I would take you for the role if you remove all your clothes. And then I remove all my clothes, but the camera doesn't show. We just see her reaction. She laughs and then she tells me to fuck off. She doesn't cast me. There are some examples like this until I arrived to this little father obsession where I decided, to build on this gradual undressing in many films in order to enter and present who I am now to the people who, brought me to Earth. So for me, it's like a renaissance. It's a scene where, like in all tribes, it's an initiation. It's a moment where in Christianity, you'd talk about baptism. You'd undress and then you reintroduce yourself without clothes and to the people who got you. So now I see it in this way. And why is it initiatic? I don't know if the word is right, but in English. But because after that, really, the trilogy I did, the first part was I wanted to make a nudist film, and it wasn't even me. I almost don't appear in it. We were few actors and actresses in Linceul that decided to gather in a house, not go out, and film their daily lives without clothes. So really, there is something there between nudity and truth, and nudity and truthful sexuality, or there's something that I was trying to figure out. In the third part of this trilogy that I just presented last week in Rotterdam, the actors and actresses finally put back their clothes on, you know? So I feel like a cycle is done now. And this Little Father obsession was the peak moment, if you want, of it. A moment of revealing as much as you can reveal, because you cannot sustain this. I cannot sustain this for a whole lifetime. I think, for example, now I feel the closet is coming back to me. I have trouble again telling people about my sexuality, while it was easier 10 years ago. So it's like there are moments where you feel strong and you want to, I'll use the metaphor, and you want to be nude. And there are moments where you're happy you did it before, because now you can't without clothes, until another cycle of nudity comes again. I'm using the metaphor to mean, this dialectics of revealing, unrevealing, veiling, unveiling, telling about yourself, protecting yourself from others.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry, and visibility, invisibility, no? Because that's, I think, also very much, yeah. Sorry, Mohammed, do you want to?
I'm sorry, it's not really a follow-up question, but is there any way in which we can access the trilogy?
We'll keep in touch through Rita. For the time being, the third one, I don't think I can, because it just started the festival run. The first two were not really shown because of okays and not okays with actors and actresses. So it depends with the dialogue with them. So it could be possible if we ask them, then come back to you. So my wish is to show, the film, but we should be very careful, because they should not be spread.
Thank you for that. And for sure, I can coordinate a follow-up between the two of you. And I think we have another question from the audience, from Joseph Lady, I think. You can unmute yourself, and yeah, if you want. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for putting together. This has been really informative, and I love the movie. I have a question that's sort of like Professor Ali's question. I am a historian. I'm in the history department. Part of what I work on is Lebanese history. And I was really drawn to the films, like the sort of genealogical research you were doing to sort of learn more about the family and, encountering all these obstacles, names changing, adoption, all sorts of really fascinating things. And it happens that in part of what I'm researching right now, I'm looking at, sort of Lebanon's history in the mid-19th century. And, there are these books full of like all the jumblats and all the abilemas, right? And they sound a lot like that church sermon that you have in the film, where it's like, so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so, right? It's like just long lines of chazans and whoever. So I guess I don't know, it just seems like maybe like a way in which your film has been relevant again in this sort of like after 2019 moment in Lebanon, where people are reevaluating inequality, and there seems to be this question of sort of whose family can have history and whose family sort of struggles to find its history. So that's kind of just a comment, but I guess my question is more, sort of how did you approach the sort of gathering of information about your family? Were you finding out a lot of information in real time as you were filming the documentary, or was some of that stuff you knew before? I just would love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph, for your comment. It actually makes sense. I wish if you ever write something on that, I would love to read it. And what you're talking about is true. There was an extensive period of research before the film. I wouldn't even know how to begin it now. I lost the threads. I don't know what we did. I actually asked my father to go back to the village that my grandfather is from, but that we're not from on paper anymore. On paper, I'm from Beirut. And then we asked the mayor there, and the mayor took us to another mayor, and from mayor to mayor, you know, I fell on, we tried to look into Ottoman files because the last recensement in Lebanon is from either 32 or 23. But my grandfather was born in 1882, 32, yeah. So my grandfather is really, really, you know, ancient, and he died in 1952. So nobody remembers him. My father doesn't remember him, and we have no info. So then there was this other possibility, that is this adopted uncle I hear of, but that my father doesn't ever want to meet because there was violence once apparently in the past, and he died in 2004. But I met his kids, and the oldest kid told me that my grandfather told his father some pieces of history that my father did not get. So the adoptive section of the family had more info than us, because my adopted uncle was older than my father and spent a few years more with my grandfather. So we knew that apparently that the grandfather of my grandfather was from the Bishalene family. When I tell this to my father, when we were having lunch together, he gets angry and he tells me, "What the fuck is this nonsense are you talking about? We're not Bishaleni, we're Mourad or Mourad al-Aswar, you know." I tell him, "But that's what your father told my adopted uncle. He doesn't want to hear about it." And it stops there because there is no book. I was given a book about Bishaleni, but no book would tell you there's somebody at some point who passed from being a Bishaleni to being a Mourad. Nobody tells you that. So in fact, everything I know about my family line stops 2 to 3 generations ago, and I had to fantasize the rest. It came naturally by speaking with actors, playing the role, by talking with Carol, with the person who played my grandfather. And then years later, I discovered that it's a queer practice, apparently, to fantasize your family line, to continue history, not by facts, but by fiction. I was happy to notice that it's one of the ways to queer history. This I discovered in 2020 in a course. And I was happy to see that my actors did that on their own. And then while making the film, I also read a lot about trans genealogy and psychology and the works of Alejandro Jodorowsky, who also makes healings in families by noticing a pattern from the great grand aunt, and that comes back. You know, this worked me at some point and ended up being bringing actors to play the role of my all the dead ancestors. I wanted to see them in front of me to be able to know what to tell them and what to speak, you know. But this ended up being a very minor layer in the film. Lots of scenes were not included. Did I answer you? Yeah. Oh, so just to finish my answer, all the research was done before, and then on the days of the shoot, we went back to the same mayor to redo the scene again. But then the mayor would look as if it was the first time. It's a bit surrealistic. And then sometimes we would discover things on the shoot and shoot them again, but no surprises. And even we asked if we have lens in many government buildings, and apparently you can discover that you have a land from 100 years ago. We have nothing.
Rita, did you want to ask another question?
Sure. I mean, I also do want to reiterate for people in the audience that they can raise their hand and write in the chat. But yeah, maybe you've spoken a bit about like more recent years and yeah, like 2020, like a reading about more queer theory, or like, I don't know, like not yeah, like talking a bit more about the present. And I mean, it's obviously a very difficult time period. I mean, not only 2020, but it's extending right now, and it's also started before. And I kind of wanted to ask you if you could reflect a bit on like what it means to be a filmmaker in Lebanon right now in this situation, because, and especially like in the situation of Lebanon, which is like not only hit by the pandemic, but also the explosion in August, and violent responses to protests, and yeah, like these different elements. And so yeah, like what if you could reflect a bit on that, and also like does it also mean something different to be a queer filmmaker in these circumstances? Yeah.
You know, it's the 100th year of modern Lebanon in 2020, and that's really a year, or I don't know if it will be a breakthrough or a breakdown, because since the protest till now, we've been living some biblical times again. During the revolution, I really wanted to participate and feel it. So I was there on the street every day since day one, and I got pushed by the police and spent nights until the morning on the streets, participated in lots of WhatsApp groups. I really want to live it. I got my camera with me a few times, took a few shots, but I felt, no, I don't want to be the filmmaker. I want to be the protester. And then after a while, I got a big heavy flu. It's before COVID. So, and I was so weakened by it that when I came back to the protest, it wasn't the same for me. That's November, December 2019. So at the time I was preparing to start the editing of Agatmus, the third part of the trilogy that I had finished shooting right before, in the summer of 2019. So I could not film a film at that time, but I want to start the editing of the one I filmed already. So I did that. Then it was stopped by the COVID situation. And during the COVID situation, I was just a teacher online because I do teach cinema, and I spent my time reading. So the filmmaker in me was, a bit asleep, don't know what to do. I have to finish the editing, can't think of another film. And then when summer came, spring, summer came, and I moved to the new house, the house that you see in the film that was destroyed finally after the end of the documentary, was reconstructed. And in 2020, they gave us the new apartment. I moved to it in 2020, beginning of July, end of June. So I was there in the new apartment, and I was happy to think that I'm gonna maybe film something in it in summer. It's not gonna be easy at all, because my friends who are a bit old did not want to come. They are afraid from COVID, etc. And I cannot reach anywhere I want. It's very difficult, but I said, at least I have this house, I made a film about it. I'm back to it, and I could bring people my age who are not very afraid, and we'll do a film together. 1 month later, my house explodes. So because the house you see in the film is next to the harbor, next to the port. So I don't know if this is a continuation of the now we can speak of this now. I couldn't speak of this during the first screenings of Little Father Obsession, but is there some sort of, like we say, curse continuing? I mean, the house was demolished, then reconstructed, then once finished, blown by the August 4th. Anyway, I dislike thinking that way, and we're reconstructing now. I've been, for the past few months, a beggar, knocking on every fund possible, donors, to find money to repair the house. Akid, the film that I wanted to make in summer with Rita, actually, Rita was supposed at some point to come and help me, and the team were excited to work with somebody new. But then, of course, no film happened, and there was no way. I mean, the last thing I had was a house, and khalas, it's not there anymore. So, you know, I spent my time now trying to be next to my father, a man of the situation, spending time with carpenters, painters, solving family issues, because the person you see in the film, that is my aunt, you know, that we visit and we see her sitting next to my father at some point, and who was a bit the initiator of the idea of the building. She said, why not gain some money, build a new building? Now we have legal issues with her. It developed into legal issues, and my father doesn't speak to her anymore. It really went bad after. What you see was the beginning of something that became worse afterwards now. So I had also to be present in these lawyer issues, trying to solve problems that are not yet solved. So couldn't really think of a new film. But I did finish Agat Mous, the third part of the trilogy, and it was selected in Rotterdam, which is my best selection till now, besides Vision du Réel for this little father obsession. So I was happy at least to have been able during this 1 year and a half to at least, reap what I sow with the latest film I shot, but I didn't really shoot something new. I did write short stories because without a house, living with my parents, not being able to film, COVID everywhere, numbers increasing, we have a social, an economic catastrophe, an inflation of 600%. At least you can write, you can write on your laptop, you know. So I did write short stories, and the CNC of France decided to help Lebanese filmmakers recently as an urgency or emergency situation. And we got a little development fund for the script I'm writing. So this made us feel, my co-writer and I, our film may be interesting to somebody. And soon I'm gonna start rewriting a new version of the script. So that's what it is to be a filmmaker now in Lebanon. I did hear that some people between the first and second lockdown did shoot their films. It happened. Lately, About Production finished the production of a film by a Lebanese woman filmmaker. I can't recall her name now. And apparently it's such a beautiful job. We got some beautiful selections now in Berlinale yesterday, to 3 Lebanese filmmakers. I don't know if they shot during all the situation or just before the protest. I'm not sure. And as a queer filmmaker, as the final part of your question, I'm happy to say that last week there was this little fund that I got from Cinema Al-Fuad that is organized by Beirut, DC, and it's a fund for a short queer film. And I have the intention of filming an older friend of mine. It would be conversations with him, and he would speak about his memories of Beirut, living in Beirut, and what was his life or alternative or memories, queer memories, like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, etc. So I think I answered many questions in one.
Yeah, thank you. And unfortunately, we've run out of time, but sort of listening to you, I mean, I'm conscious that, you know, so much of what you describe, of course, is particular and unique to being in Lebanon at this specific historical moment. But I mean, over the last few weeks, I've attended lots of events around the 10 years of Arab uprising. You know, there's sort of lots of talk about that. And when I sort of look across the region, of course, you know, we see that in different ways, there's so many hardships. And, you know, I'm very much following, for example, what's happening in Iraq. And Iraq is also, you know, it's a total disaster. And I think one of the things that I start to realize more and more that, you know, while many of us are so disillusioned with the kind of formal party politics and even some of the kind of more conventional political mobilizing, but some, you know, where I think there is enormous hope, creativity, and, you know, something sort of vision happening is in the arts. It's, you know, in making films, it's in making music, theater, and so on. And so I'm, you know, I feel, you know, very grateful and, you know, without putting too much responsibility, but I think that's really where, you know, transformation is happening. And so that's really amazing. Yeah, I'd like to thank you and thank you all. Rita, I don't know if you want to say a few words.
Yeah,
as
just
well.
thank you. Thank you, Selim, and thank you for everybody for coming. I enjoyed the discussion a lot. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a
I feel
lot.
blessed to be with you and share my thoughts. This means a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you. And if you're okay with it, we'll be sharing this with the wider community here.
Please do. Maybe some
Yes.
people could not join us.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.